Harlem, or Friday, October 14th, 1932, 9 to 26 p.m. A hard rain tapped the windows of the Teresa Hotel like knuckles demanding entry. Inside the lobby, the air was warm, crowded, and tense, half perfume, half cigar smoke, because tonight wasn't just another Harlem night. Tonight, Bumpy Johnson was walking into a room where men normally didn't allow him to breathe. He wore a dark overcoat, still wet at the shoulders, hat low, expression calm. But every man who saw him felt it. This was a meeting arranged by Chicago. 2 men from Capone's side were already there in the hotel's private lounge, where the lights were softer and the faces were harder. One was a messenger, a nervous type, with slick hair and a tie too tight. The other one didn't belong to that category. He was the reason the room was quiet. Frankie Books Moretti. Capone's right-hand man, his fixer, his accountant, the man who could make a problem disappear without gunfire. Moretti stood by the fireplace like he owned it, holding a glass of whiskey like it was part of the deal. When Bumpy entered, Moretti didn't step forward, didn't smile, didn't nod. Just looked Bumpy up and down with a slow, insulting patience, as if deciding whether this Harlem man counted as furniture. The messenger cleared his throat and tried to save it. "Mr. Johnson, Frankie Books Moretti." Bumpy's eyes stayed locked on Moretti. He took off his gloves slowly. Then he did the one thing that forced every man in that lounge to stop breathing. Bumpy extended his hand. A clean gesture, a simple line in the sand. And Frankie Moretti refused it. He didn't slap it away, didn't insult him with words. He did something worse. He looked at Bumpy's hand like it was dirty. Then he turned his shoulder slightly, just enough to make it public, and said, "I don't shake hands with street numbers." The words landed like broken glass. Bumpy didn't flinch, not one muscle. But the temperature in the lounge dropped so fast it felt like winter had stepped in. Moretti set his drink down and finally spoke business, cold and neat. "Capone's expanding. Harlem is a port. Harlem is money. Harlem is leverage. You'll cooperate, or Chicago will send somebody who doesn't ask." Bumpy's hand slowly withdrew. He folded his gloves once, twice. Then he answered, voice low, "Harlem isn't a port, it's a home." Moretti smirked like that was adorable. "You people always confuse those two." Bumpy stepped closer, close enough for Moretti to smell the rain on his coat. "You came here tonight," Bumpy said, "to tell me Chicago can do what it wants." Moretti leaned in. "I came here tonight to show you it already has." He motioned toward the back corner. 2 men stood there. Harlem men. Familiar faces. Not Italian, not Chicago. That's when Bumpy realized the meeting wasn't just a threat, it was a test. Because those 2 Harlem men weren't there for protection. They were there to witness Bumpy being disrespected and doing nothing about it. Moretti reached into his pocket and placed something on the table between them. A folded paper, a list of names, number spots, storefronts, drivers, cash drops, then one final line at the bottom. "First payment due by sunrise." Bumpy stared at the paper, then at Moretti. "You want tribute?" Moretti's eyes were flat. "I want obedience." Bumpy's jaw tightened, not from anger, from calculation, because now he understood what Chicago really wanted. Not money. They wanted Harlem kneeling. And Frankie Books Moretti turned to leave, satisfied, already walking away like the matter was finished. At the doorway, he paused and glanced back over his shoulder. "Oh, and Johnson?" Bumpy didn't answer. Moretti smiled thinly. "Next time you offer your hand, Make sure it's attached to something worth shaking. And then he was gone. Down the hall, raincoat on, heading into the night with 2 bodyguards, and Harlem's air still stuck in his lungs. Bumpy didn't move for several seconds. Then he folded the paper once, tucked it into his coat, and said to the men still watching him, "Everybody saw what happened." His voice stayed quiet. "But tomorrow morning, Harlem decides what it means." Outside, the city kept breathing. But somewhere in the dark streets below the Teresa Hotel, the first man was already being followed. Because by sunrise, Frankie Books Moretti would be found dead, and the question wouldn't be who did it. The question would be, did Bumpy Johnson just declare war on Al Capone without firing a single shot? Harlem's Friday, October 14th, 1932, 11:03 p.m. 3 blocks south of the Teresa Hotel, the rain turned the streets into black glass. Inside a cramped back office above a barbershop that never cut hair after sunset, a man sat at a table with a pen in his hand and shaking fingers he couldn't control. His name was Calvin Cal Reddick, Harlem-born, 29 years old, smart enough to count money faster than most men could blink, and terrified enough tonight that he kept licking his lips like they were drying out. Because Cal wasn't just a numbers runner. Cal was the reason money moved clean in Harlem. The quiet bookkeeper who knew who got paid, who got cheated, and who got killed. On the table in front of him was an open ledger, and beside it was something far worse. A small photograph. A woman in a cheap Sunday dress, trying to smile even though the camera captured fear in her eyes. Lila Reddick, his wife. And on the back of the photo in pencil, one line, sunrise. Cal stared at it like it was a coffin lid. Then a voice behind him said, calm as a priest, "You should stop staring at it." Cal flinched, turned. A man stood near the door with his coat still on, hat still low. Bumpy Johnson, not surrounded by an army, not making noise, just there, like he belonged. Cal stood too fast, knocking his chair back. "Mr. Johnson, I didn't know you was coming." Bumpy's eyes scanned the room, the ledger, the photo, the sweat on Cal's face. "I heard Chicago came to town," Bumpy said. Cal tried to swallow. Failed. They did more than come." Bumpy walked closer, quiet footsteps on old wooden boards. He didn't touch the ledger yet, didn't need to. "Tell me what you know." Cal's mouth opened, but the words wouldn't climb out. So Bumpy did something that made Cal's chest tighten harder. Thus, he sat down, right in front of him, like they had time, like fear didn't exist. "You're scared," Bumpy said. Cal let out a laugh that sounded broken. "Scared?" he whispered. "Mr. Johnson, they showed me my wife. They had her outside the Teresa like they was showing me a coat they bought." Bumpy's jaw tightened. "Moretti?" Cal nodded quickly. He didn't even raise his voice. That's what got me. He just told me Harlem's money is Chicago's money now, and he told me I'm the man who's going to make it happen. Bumpy stared at him. "You're my bookkeeper." Cal's eyes filled, furious and ashamed. I know what that makes me." He slammed his palm on the table, then immediately regretted it, like loud sounds could kill him. "I don't got a choice." Bumpy didn't blink. "There's always a choice." Cal's voice cracked. "They'll kill her." That was the personal problem, the pressure, the trap. Cal wasn't trying to get rich. He wasn't trying to become somebody. He was trying to keep his wife alive. Because Lila wasn't just a name. She was the only good thing Cal had ever held on to. They'd grown up in the same alley, same blocks, same hunger. When Cal got his first money job in Harlem, he'd promised her one thing, No more begging, no more cold nights. I'll make the numbers work for us. And now the numbers were about to bury them. Cal leaned forward, voice shaking. They told me I'd deliver the first tribute list by sunrise. Names, spots, amounts. They want it official, they want it clean. Bumpy's eyes went to the ledger, then to the photo. And if you don't, Cal swallowed hard. Then I get Lila back, in pieces. Silence took the room. Even the rain outside seemed to soften, like it didn't want to interrupt something sacred. Bumpy's voice lowered. Cal, look at me. Cal raised his eyes slowly. Bumpy's stare wasn't angry, it wasn't dramatic. It was worse. It was disappointed, like a father watching a son reach for the wrong knife. You know what they're asking you to do? Cal whispered. Yes. You know what happens after tribute? Cal's eyes darted away. Moretti said. I don't care what he said. Bumpy snapped, sudden steel. I care what you know. Cal's throat tightened. If he did this, Harlem would kneel. Every runner, every shop owner, every poor family that survived on small bets. They'd all start paying Chicago. Cal would become the man who sold his own neighborhood. But if he didn't, his wife died by morning. Bumpy leaned back slightly, studying him. Then came the moral choice, laid out like a loaded pistol. You can save your wife, Bumpy said softly. Cal's breath caught. You can hand Moretti your ledger, your lists, your routes, and Harlem will pay for Lila's life. Cal's eyes widened, desperate. But if you do it, Bumpy continued, Chicago won't stop with tribute. They'll demand blood next. They'll demand your loyalty forever. And the day they get bored, Bumpy tapped the photo. They'll take her anyway? Cal's hands trembled so badly, the pen rolled off the table and hit the floor. His whole body sagged. So what you want me to do? He whispered. Tell me what you want me to do, Mr. Johnson. Bumpy stared at him for a long beat. Then he stood up. And when he spoke, his words didn't sound like comfort. They sounded like a sentence being decided. I want you to live, he said. Cal's face twisted. And I want your wife to live. A surge of hope hit Cal so fast it almost hurt. But Bumpy wasn't finished. And I want Chicago to learn something tonight. Bumpy moved to the door. Before leaving, he looked back. Cal, you're going to do exactly what Moretti asked. Cal froze. Bumpy's eyes narrowed, but not for him. Cal's heart hammered. What? Hey, what does that mean? Bumpy opened the door, letting the hallway's cold air slice in. It means, Bumpy said, voice flat, by sunrise, someone's going to be holding a list. He paused. And it won't be you? Then the door shut. Cal stood there in the silence, staring at the ledger, the photograph, and the empty chair because now the pressure doubled. Chicago wanted tribute. Bumpy wanted obedience too. And Cal Reddick was trapped between two monsters, one with money, one with Harlem, and in 6 hours, one of them would make him choose. Harlem, Saturday, October 15th, 1932. 2:18 a.m. The rain stopped, but Harlem didn't relax. When the streets go quiet after midnight, you can hear everything. Footsteps 2 blocks away. A car idling too long. A door closing softly, like it's hiding a crime. Calvin Reddick felt every sound in his bones. He stood at the window of the back office, watching Lenox Avenue like a man waiting for an executioner. The ledger was closed now, tied with string, sitting in the center of the table like a suitcase full of sin. Bumpy had left him with 2 orders, neither of them spoken out loud. Do what Chicago asked, And don't let Harlem pay for it. That wasn't a plan. That was a tightrope. Downstairs, the barbershop was dark. No customers, no clippers. Just two of Bumpy's men sitting in chairs with coats on, hands visible, eyes awake. Protection or surveillance. Cal couldn't tell which. Then the phone rang. Cal almost jumped out of his skin. He stared at it like it might bite. It rang again, steady, calm, confident. Cal picked up on the third ring, voice shaky. Reddick. A man's voice came through smooth as polished steel. Cal, you got the book? Cal recognized it immediately. Not Moretti. One of his men. Vito Santoro. Chicago muscle with a brain. A man who spoke softly because he never needed to raise his voice. Cal's throat tightened. Yes. Good, Vito said. You deliver at sunrise. Same spot we said, no mistakes. Cal swallowed. I want my wife. Vito chuckled faintly, like Cal had asked for dessert. You'll get her if you behave. Cal's knuckles whitened around the receiver. I need to hear her, just for 1 second. Silence. Then movement, a muffled sound, and a voice, thin and trembling, cut through the line like a knife. Cal. It was Lila, one word. But it hit him so hard his eyes burned. Lila, I'm... The line cut. Vito returned like nothing happened. Sunrise, Cal. Don't be stupid. Click. The dial tone screamed in Cal's ear. He put the phone down slowly, like if he moved too fast he'd break apart. And that's when he understood. Chicago wasn't just threatening. They were testing him. They wanted to see if fear could turn a Harlem man into a Chicago tool. Cal backed away from the desk and pressed his palm to his forehead. Then the office door opened. Bumpy walked in again. Same calm, same coat, like he didn't sleep. But his eyes were different, sharper, as if he'd already seen what the night would become. You got the call, Bumpy said. Cal nodded, swallowed bile. They let me hear her. Bumpy's jaw tightened. Good. Cal blinked. Good? Bumpy stepped closer, looking at the ledger. Means she's alive right now. Cal's voice rose, cracking. But she won't be if I mess up. Bumpy stared him down. You're not messing up. Cal's breathing became ragged. You said I'm supposed to do what they asked. You said deliver the list. Bumpy nodded once. That's still true? Cal's face twisted, desperate. Then why you here? Why you keep coming in and out like this is normal? Mr. Johnson, sunrise is in 4 hours. Bumpy leaned forward slightly. Because the longer you panic, the more likely you do something stupid. Cal looked away, ashamed and furious. Bumpy's tone softened a fraction. Tell me the delivery spot. Cal hesitated. Bumpy waited. Patient, deadly patience. Cal finally whispered. Under the old tracks by 125th, near the rail yard. They said, bring it alone. Bumpy nodded slowly. Then he reached into his coat and placed something on the table. A small revolver. Not flashy, not new, just reliable. Cal stared at it like it was poison. What's that for? Bumpy's voice was low. For the moment you realized Chicago was never going to let you walk away. Cal's stomach dropped. What are you saying? Bumpy stepped closer. I'm saying this is the part where men get confused. They think the deal is real. Cal shook his head hard. No, Vito promised. Bumpy cut him off. Chicago doesn't promise. Chicago borrows you, then returns you broken. Cal's hands trembled. So what's your plan? Bumpy didn't answer immediately. He turned toward the window, watching the street below like he was listening to something only he could hear. Then he said, My plan is simple. He looked back at Cal. You are going to walk to that rail yard at sunrise with that ledger. Cal's throat tightened. And then? Bumpy's eyes hardened. And then you're going to hand it over. Cal blinked rapidly. That's it? Bumpy stepped closer until Cal could smell the tobacco on his breath. No, he whispered. That's the beginning. Cal's voice broke. Mr. Johnson, I can't play games like you. They got my wife. Bumpy's face stayed calm, but his voice turned razor sharp. This ain't a game. It's a war. He tapped the ledger. And you're already in it. Cal's chest heaved. He wanted to scream that none of this was fair, that he didn't sign up for politics and pride and violence. He signed up for numbers. But numbers didn't matter anymore. Only bodies did. Bumpy turned toward the door. Just before stepping out, he said, Cal, listen to me carefully. Cal looked up. Bumpy's voice dropped so low it was almost a prayer. By sunrise, one of these things is going to happen. He held up one finger. 1. Chicago takes Harlem's money. Second finger. 2. Chicago loses its right-hand man. Cal's eyes widened. Bumpy's third finger rose. Or 3. Harlem loses you. Cal swallowed hard. Bumpy stepped out and closed the door behind him. Cal stood alone again with the ledger, the gun, and the photo. Outside, somewhere far off, a car door slammed. Then another. Cal pressed his face to the glass and saw headlights crawling through the darkness. Not one car. 3. And they weren't circling the block. They were stopping, right outside the building. Cal's blood ran cold. Because Bumpy's men downstairs didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even reach for weapons. They just sat there like they expected it, like this was arranged. And in that instant, Cal felt the floor tilt under him. A single thought hit his mind like a gunshot. What if the betrayal isn't coming from Chicago? He backed away from the window, heartbeat roaring. Then the footsteps started climbing the stairs. Slow, heavy, unhurried, coming straight for his door. And Cal realized, too late, sunrise wasn't the deadline, it was the cover. Because somebody was about to force a choice out of him right now. Harlem's. Saturday, October 15th, 1932. 2:41 a.m. The footsteps climbed like a countdown. Calvin Reddick stood frozen in the center of the office, the revolver on the table in front of him, the ledger beside it like a confession waiting to be signed. Downstairs, Bumpy's men didn't move. That was the first confirmation that made Cal's stomach drop. Because if this was a Chicago raid, those two would have been on their feet. Instead, they sat still, eyes forward, like they were escorting death, not resisting it. The footsteps reached the landing, then a knock, not loud, not angry, polite. The kind of knock that says we're coming in either way. Cal swallowed and forced his voice to work. Who is it? A pause. Then a voice he recognized, soft, smooth, almost friendly. Cal, open up. It was Vito Santoro, Chicago. Cal's knees went weak. His hands shot toward the revolver. But he didn't pick it up. He only hovered over it like touching it would make the situation real. Vito, Cal called through the door, trying to sound steady. What are you doing here? Vito laughed gently. What I'm doing? I'm saving you from a mistake. Cal's breath caught. I didn't do anything. That's the problem, Vito said. You haven't done enough. Cal's eyes flicked to the window. 3 cars outside, at least 5 men. He could already picture their faces. Clean suits, hard eyes, gloves for guns. Then Vito's voice turned colder. "Open the door, Cal. Don't make this complicated." Cal looked down at the revolver, then at the ledger, then at the photo. Leela, his wife, his life, his weakness. He stepped forward and unlocked the door with shaking fingers. The moment it opened, the room filled with men like smoke. Vito entered first, hat on, coat collar up, calm as church. Behind him came two Italian enforcers with mean faces and clean shoes. And behind them, a Harlem man, a familiar face. A man Cal had seen 100 times around number spots and after-hours bars. Duke Mullins, Bumpy's man. One of the two downstairs? Duke didn't look at Cal. He just stepped inside and shut the door. And that was the moment Cal realized his fear had guessed right. The betrayal wasn't just Chicago. It was inside Harlem. Vito walked to the table like he owned it, picked up Cal's ledger with one hand, flipped it open. "Beautiful work," he said. "This is why Capone likes you." Cal's voice shook. "What is this? Why are you here now? Sunrise ain't—" Vito snapped the ledger shut. "Sunrise was for show?" Cal froze. Vito turned slightly, smiling. "You didn't think we'd leave it to chance, did you? You didn't think we'd let you spend the night with Bumpy whispering in your ear like he's your father?" Cal's mouth opened, but no words came. Vito walked closer, lowering his voice. "We're here now because there's been a complication." Cal whispered, "What complication?" Vito's eyes hardened. "Frankie Moretti." Cal blinked. "What about him?" Vito leaned in. "He's dead." The words hit Cal like a brick. Dead. Already. It wasn't sunrise yet. It wasn't even 3 a.m. Cal's throat tightened and instinctively his eyes flicked to Duke. Duke still wouldn't meet his gaze. Vito watched Cal's reaction and smiled thinly. "Oh, don't look at him like that," Vito said. "He didn't pull the trigger." Cal whispered, "Then who—" Vito's smile vanished. "That's what we're trying to find out." He turned his head slightly. One of his men pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and blew smoke toward the ceiling like a warning signal. Vito continued. Frankie Books Moretti was Capone's hand. Capone's brain, his favorite tool. Cal swallowed hard. "And tonight," Vito said, voice flat, "someone cut that hand off." Cal's eyes widened. Vito stared at him like a knife. "So here's what happens next, Cal." He tapped the ledger against Cal's chest once, light, humiliating. "You're going to tell us where Bumpy Johnson went after he left you?" Cal shook his head. "I don't know." Vito slapped him. Not hard enough to knock him down, hard enough to make his vision flash. The room went silent. Cal tasted blood. Vito's voice lowered dangerously. "Don't insult me." Cal's breath came in sharp gasps. "I swear, I don't know." Vito nodded slowly, as if considering. Then he gestured toward Duke. "Search the room." Duke moved, quick and smooth, pulling open drawers, checking under the desk, like he'd done this before. Cal watched him, shaking. "You're with them?" Cal whispered. Duke's jaw clenched, but he still didn't look at him. Vito leaned closer to Cal's ear. "This is the part where you learn something." Cal trembled. "What?" Vito's voice turned almost gentle. "Bumpy Johnson ain't your savior." Cal's eyes darted. Vito continued. "He's using you." Cal swallowed. "No, he said he'd save my wife." Vito laughed, quiet, cruel. "Save her?" Vito said. "Cal, I have your wife." Cal's face twisted in horror. Vito stepped back, nodded to one of his men. The enforcer reached into his coat and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. He set it on the desk, unwrapped it. Cal's heart stopped. It was Lila's wedding ring. still wet, still smeared slightly with mud. Cal's knees almost gave out. No, no. Vito watched the collapse in his face like it was entertainment. You want proof? Vito asked softly. You want to know how real this is? He leaned forward. Bumpy can't touch this. Not without burning Harlem down. Cal's tears started without permission. Where is she? Vito raised his eyebrows. That depends. Cal's voice cracked into a scream. Where is she? Vito slapped him again, harder this time. Cal stumbled back into the wall, dizzy. Vito's tone stayed calm, almost bored. I'm going to ask again. Where did Bumpy go? Cal's eyes flicked toward the revolver. Bumpy left it for this exact moment. But Cal didn't reach. Because if he shot Vito, Lila was dead. If he didn't, Harlem might be dead. That moral choice slammed into him like a closing door, loyalty versus survival, honor versus love. Vito watched Cal's eyes drift toward the gun and smiled. Yeah, he said quietly. I see you thinking about it. Then he leaned in close and whispered something that turned Cal's blood to ice. Cal, Bumpy Johnson already knows where your wife is. Cal froze. What? Vito smiled. He knows. He knew before I walked in. Cal shook his head violently. No, he wouldn't. Vito's eyes went dead serious. He made a trade. Cal's voice dropped to a whisper. A trade? Vito nodded once. He gave Frankie Moretti's location. Cal stared at him like he'd spoken another language. Vito continued, slow and precise, like reading a sentence. Bumpy needed Frankie Moretti dead to send a message to Capone. But he couldn't get close to Frankie without losing half his men. He tapped the ledger again. So he used you. Cal's face twisted in disbelief. Vito's voice tightened. Bumpy gave up Frankie's route. Where he would be walking. What time, what door? Cal's lips trembled. And in return, Vito said, almost smiling now, Bumpy asked for Lila. Cal's body went cold. Vito leaned in close, not delivering the twist like a bullet. He didn't ask for her freedom, Cal. Cal couldn't breathe. Vito's whisper cut through everything. He asked for her as bait, to see if you'd break. Cal slid down the wall like his bones turned to water, and Vito's final words shattered him. Your wife is a test. Silence. Then Duke, Bumpy's man, straightened up from the drawers. He held up something small and dark. It said a note. Duke finally looked at Cal for the first time tonight, and his eyes weren't proud. They were ashamed. Duke handed the note to Vito. Vito opened it and read it out loud. Calvin Reddick will deliver the ledger personally. Sunrise, rail yard, alone. BJ. Cal's mouth opened in a silent sob. Vito folded the note slowly and placed it on Cal's chest like a death certificate. Then he nodded. All right, he said, now we know. Cal whispered through tears, voice broken. Bumpy did this? Vito stepped back and adjusted his cuffs. Doesn't matter what he did. Cal looked up, eyes wild. It matters to me. Vito's expression didn't change. It matters to nobody. He turned to his men. Take Cal. Cal panicked. No, please, please. The enforcers grabbed him by the arms. Cal thrashed like an animal. Lila! Where is Lila? Vito paused at the door and looked back with calm cruelty. You'll see her? Cal's eyes filled with hope for half a second. Vito's mouth curled slightly. Right before you die. And then they dragged Cal out, down the stairs, past the motionless Harlem guards who didn't help him, didn't even blink. Cal screamed until his throat broke, and outside one of the cars opened its trunk. Because Sunrise wasn't about tribute anymore. It was about a message. And now Cal understood the full horror. Frankie Moretti wasn't the only body Chicago wanted. They wanted Harlem to believe Bumpy Johnson was weak. They wanted Harlem to believe he'd sell his own man. They wanted to turn Cal into proof. As the trunk slammed shut, Cal's last clear thought was pure terror. If Bumpy really made a trade, then the only person who can save Lila now is the same person who might have sacrificed her. And that meant the next move wasn't about money. It was about trust. And trust was about to get people killed. Harlem, Saturday, October 15th, 1932. 5:12 a.m. The sky over Harlem turned the color of bruises, purple fading into sickly gray. A delivery truck rolled slowly down 125th Street with no markings and no hurry. The driver kept both hands tight on the wheel like he didn't want to touch anything else in the world. It stopped beside an alley behind a closed fish market. 2 men jumped out. They weren't police. They weren't Harlem. Chicago. They dragged something heavy from the back, a body wrapped in canvas. Then they did the cruelest thing. They didn't hide it. They didn't bury it. They left it, right where people would find it when the day started, like a billboard. By 6 a.m., the first screams hit the street. Women pulling children back. Men standing frozen in doorways. A few runners stepping closer, then stumbling away as soon as they recognized the shoes. Because even before the canvas was fully pulled back, everyone knew. Calvin Cal Reddick. His face was swollen. One eye nearly shut. Mouth slightly open like he'd tried to speak and been denied permission. And pinned to his chest with a small nail was a folded paper. Smooth, clean, deliberate. A note. Someone opened it and read it aloud, voice shaking. This is what happens to Harlem men who play both sides. No signature, it didn't need one. Harlem understood violence, but this wasn't normal street violence. This was foreign violence, Chicago's kind, the kind meant to humiliate, not just kill. Within minutes, the back alleys filled with whispers. He betrayed Bumpy. No, Bumpy betrayed him. Capone did this. Bumpy let it happen. And that was the real damage. Not Cal's body. Not even the message. The damage was what the note did to people's minds. It made the neighborhood split down the middle like rotten wood. At 6:21 a.m., Bumpy Johnson stood inside his own apartment, fully dressed, listening as his Lieutenant Duke Mullins talked too fast. Duke's face was pale, eyes bloodshot. They grabbed him, Bumpy. I ain't know they was gonna... Bumpy raised one hand. Stop. Duke froze. Bumpy's gaze was so cold it could have chilled whiskey. You let Italians walk into my building. Duke swallowed hard. They had men outside. I thought it was your play. Bumpy stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. My play? Duke's lip trembled. You said, deliver the ledger. You said... Bumpy's hand moved like lightning, not a punch, a grip. He grabbed Duke by the collar and pulled him close enough to smell his fear. Cal was mine, Bumpy hissed. His wife was innocent. You let them take him like he was trash. Duke shook violently. I was trying to live. Bumpy's eyes flared. That's what rats say. Duke whispered. They got my brother. They said they'd put him in the river if I didn't. Bumpy's grip loosened slightly. Not mercy. Calculation. Because now Bumpy knew something that made his stomach twist. Chicago wasn't just attacking Harlem. They were recruiting Harlem, buying fear, turning brothers into knives. Bumpy released Duke and walked to the window. Outside, Harlem was waking up angry and confused, and Bumpy understood the cost. Frankie Moretti's death had been a message to Capone. But Cal's death? That was Capone's reply. And it was smarter. Because Capone wasn't trying to defeat Bumpy with bullets. He was trying to defeat him with doubt. Bumpy stared at the street and spoke like a vow. "Find me Lila." Duke wiped tears. "Where is she?" Bumpy's eyes darkened. "I don't know." That was the truth. And it was the most dangerous truth of all. Because now Bumpy had killed Chicago's right-hand man. But Chicago had taken a Harlem woman. And Cal died believing Bumpy sold him out. So the question wasn't who won last night. The question was how long before Harlem stops believing in Bumpy Johnson. Harlem, Saturday, October 15th, 1932. 8:44 a.m. By mid-morning, Harlem didn't feel like Harlem anymore. It felt occupied. Men stood on corners not to talk, to watch. Shop owners didn't open fully. Doors stayed half-locked. Eyes stayed scanning the street like trouble had a uniform. And in every barber shop, every church step, every hallway where women whispered, there was only one topic: Cal Reddick's body. Not just that he was dead, but how he was left, how his face was ruined, how the note was pinned like a badge of shame. It didn't matter what the truth was anymore. The street created its own truth. Some said Cal tried to play Bumpy and Chicago at the same time. Others said Bumpy offered Cal up to keep his hands clean. And the worst rumor, the one that moved like smoke through the blocks, was this: Bumpy ain't protecting his own anymore. That rumor was worth more than bullets, because bullets only kill bodies. Rumors kill, rule. At 9:10 a.m., Bumpy walked into Auntie Mabel's kitchen on 131st, an unassuming little restaurant where the coffee was always burnt and the back room was always full. His men were already there, faces tight, hands close to coats, every chair turned toward the door. Bumpy didn't sit at the head of the table. He sat in the middle. That was intentional. He wanted them to see this wasn't about ego, this was about survival. Across from him sat a man with tired eyes and a swollen knuckle, Reverend Isaiah Klein. He wasn't a gangster, he wasn't muscle. He was the kind of man Harlem listened to when the streets got ugly. And today, he looked like he hadn't slept. "You're losing the people," the Reverend said quietly. Bumpy's expression didn't change. "I didn't ask for a sermon." "This ain't a sermon," Klein replied. "This is a warning." Bumpy leaned forward slightly. "Talk." Klein's voice dropped. "Women are pulling their sons off corners. Numbers runners are skipping routes. Men who used to trust you are watching you like they don't know you." Bumpy's jaw tightened. "Because of a dead bookkeeper?" Klein's eyes flashed. "No, because of what his death means." Silence thickened. Then Klein said the line that hit hardest. "They're saying you shook hands with Chicago in the dark, and Cal paid the price." Bumpy didn't flinch, but his throat hardened. Around the table, a few men shifted uncomfortably. Some looked down. Bumpy saw it immediately. The poison was already inside. He turned his gaze slowly toward Duke Mullins. Duke sat stiff, avoiding eye contact. Bumpy stared at him for a long moment, then spoke. "Stand up." Duke's head snapped up. "Bumpy, stand up." Duke rose slowly, hands half raised like he was about to beg. Bumpy faced the whole table. "This is Duke Mullins," he said. "A man I fed. A man I trusted." Duke swallowed hard. Bumpy continued, voice calm but deadly. "Chicago walked into our building last night, took Cal, took the ledger, took our pride. And Duke here let it happen." A ripple moved through the room like a sharp wind. Duke whispered, "They had my brother." Bumpy cut him off. Everyone has someone they love, Bumpy snapped. That's what Chicago is buying. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out something small, a pocket watch, silver scratched, personal. He tossed it onto the table. It belonged to Cal. The men stared. Bumpy's voice lowered. They pinned a note to his chest like he was a dog. He looked around the room. If Harlem believes I did that, then Harlem is already dead. Klein leaned forward. So what do you do? Bumpy didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up a cup of coffee and took one slow sip. Too calm for the moment. Then he said, I give Harlem something Chicago can't twist. He looked at Duke again. You're going to take me to your Chicago contact. Duke's eyes widened in terror. I can't. Bumpy leaned in close enough that Duke could see death living behind his eyes. Yes, you can. Duke trembled. Bumpy's voice was ice. Because if you don't, your brother dies anyway. Duke's shoulders slumped. Tears filled his eyes. I know where they meet, he whispered. A basement on the west side. They use a tailor shop. Bumpy nodded once. Then he turned back to the table. Tonight, he said, Harlem gets its answer. Klein's voice turned urgent. What answer? Bumpy's eyes narrowed. The answer to whether Chicago can walk in here and take whoever they want. He stood, pulling on his gloves. And the answer to whether Cal Reddick died for nothing. The men watched him like they were watching a storm form. Bumpy paused at the door and spoke without turning back. By tomorrow morning, Harlem won't be guessing anymore. Because now the street was split. The rumors were growing teeth. And Bumpy Johnson had exactly one chance left. Either prove he didn't sell his own, or lose Harlem without Chicago firing another shot. Harlem, Jatiki is Sunday, October 16th, 1932. 6:32 a.m. The next morning, the city woke up expecting blood. They expected a Chicago body in an alley. They expected Bumpy to retaliate loud. Guns, headlines, sirens. But Harlem got something colder. At sunrise, a delivery boy found a wooden crate placed neatly on the steps of St. Mark's Church. No note pinned with nails. No taunt. Just a crate that smelled faintly of bleach. Inside was a man, alive, hands bound, face bruised, eyes wide with panic. Duke Mullins, Bumpy's man, the alleged traitor. And tied to Duke's wrist was a paper tag, written in clean block letters. He chose Chicago. That was Bumpy's answer to the rumor. Not a speech. Not an execution in the street. A public return, alive. So Harlem could look Duke in the face and judge with their own eyes. But that wasn't the twist. Because later that afternoon, Lila Reddick walked into Reverend Klein's office, shaking, underweight, alive. She said Chicago dumped her near the river after midnight. She also said one more thing. Before they released her, Vito Santoro leaned close and whispered, "Tell Bumpy thanks." That line spread fast, and it hit Harlem like a gunshot. Because it meant the unthinkable. Bumpy didn't win, he didn't lose, he got played. Capone didn't punish Harlem. He taught Harlem a lesson that Chicago could touch anyone, anytime, and still walk away. Cal died. Lila lived. Duke lived. And Bumpy Johnson was left with the worst kind of ending. Not a defeated enemy, but a neighborhood that now feared what mercy might cost. If you want the next story where Bumpy hunts the man who whispered thanks, subscribe because the next move wasn't war. It was revenge.